Christmas Eve was always magical at our house. My family had a tradition. Every year, we'd add a new ornament to the Christmas tree, each with its own story. This year, I was hosting Christmas for the first time, and I was determined to make it perfect. I unpacked the old decorations from storage, each piece wrapped in tissue paper, bringing it with the scent of pine and memories. As I dug through the box, I found an ornament I didn't recognize. A heavy, tarnished silver bell, its surface etched with intricate designs. It felt icy in my hand, even though the room was warm. I called my mom, asking if she remembered it, but her answer was unsettling. That bell? We got rid of it years ago. It came from the house your great-grandmother lived in. The one she always said was cursed. She believed the bell was haunted. Haunted? You're joking. I laughed nervously. She swore it rang on its own. My mom continued. Said it was a warning. We threw it out. You sure it's the same one? I assured her it was and brushed it off as a weird coincidence. Still, I couldn't resist hanging it on the tree. It was beautiful in a sinister kind of way. That night, after everyone else had gone to bed, I sat by the tree with my mug of hot chocolate, admiring the lights. The silver bell glinted in the glow, its intricate carvings almost seeming to shift. Then it rang. It wasn't a soft chime like you'd expect. It was a sharp, piercing, echoing sound that went throughout my house. I jumped, spilling hot chocolate on my lap. My heart pounded as I stared at the bell, swaying slightly as if someone had just touched it. Probably just a draft, I muttered, though every window was sealed tight. I was still trying to calm myself down when I noticed something in the reflection of the window. It was a figure, tall, shadowy, with elongated limbs, stood behind me. I spun around, but nothing was there. Just the tree, the ornaments, and that cursed bell. I didn't sleep much that night, and when I finally did, I dreamt of a woman's voice, whispering, "Don't ignore the warning." The next morning, I decided to take the bell down. I reached for it, but the moment my fingers touched the metal, an overwhelming wave of nausea hit me. My vision blurred, and I stumbled back, knocking over an entire row of ornaments. That's when I saw it. A tiny inscription on the bell's underside, words etched in a language I couldn't read. The carving seemed to shimmer, as if alive. I grabbed my phone and snapped a picture, planning to translate it later. As soon as the bell was off the tree, the atmosphere in the house shifted. It felt lighter, less oppressive. I shoved the bell back into the storage box and buried it under layers of other decorations. That night, as we gathered for Christmas dinner, the mood was festive. My parents, siblings, and cousins filled the room with laughter. But just as we began to eat, a loud clang echoed from the living room. I froze. So did everyone else. Slowly, I stood up and walked to the living room, my family trailing behind me. The silver bell was somehow back on the Christmas tree, swinging gently as if someone had just rung it. My mom whispered, "It's the warning." Before I could respond, the power went out, plunging us into complete darkness. From somewhere in the room, a low, guttural growl reverberated, followed by the faint of footsteps heading straight towards us. The bell rang again, and Christmas was never the same ever again. It was the coldest Christmas Eve I could remember. Snow blanketed the ground outside, and the streets were quiet, as though the entire world had gone to sleep early. I was alone in the old family cabin for the first time, having driven up that morning to spend a peaceful holiday away from the chaos of the city. I lit the fireplace, poured myself a glass of wine, and settled into the couch with a thick blanket. The only sound was the crackle of the fire. But at around 9 p.m., just as I was getting drowsy, there was a knock at the front door. It startled me, sharp and deliberate. 3 slow, heavy knocks. The cabin was miles from the nearest neighbor, and the road leading up to it was buried under snow. No car could have possibly made it up here. Thinking it might be a hiker in trouble, I reluctantly got up and peered through the peephole. I opened the door slightly, letting the icy air rush in, and looked around. Nothing but darkness and snow. My footprints from earlier that day were the only marks in the white blanket. I stepped outside and glanced at the front porch. No new footprints. "Hello?" I called out into the night. Only the wind answered. I shut the door, bolted it, and tried to brush off the eerie feeling creeping over me. Probably just the wind rattling. About an hour later, just as I had begun to relax, the knocks came back. 3 heavy thuds on the front door. I jumped off the couch, my heart racing. I grabbed the poker from the fireplace and crept towards the door. "Who's there?" Nothing. I pressed my ear to the door, listening. The only sound was the faint crackle of the fire behind me. Then, just as I was about to step away, there was a soft scratching sound, dragging down the wood. I stumbled back, dropping the poker with a loud clang. My breath caught in my throat as the scratching moved from the door to the window nearest me. I didn't want to look, but something compelled me to. The curtains were thin, and through them, I saw a shadow, standing just outside, tall and motionless. My legs locked into place. The figure didn't move, didn't flinch. It just stood there. "Go away!" I yelled, my voice breaking. The shadow leaned closer, and I saw something impossible. 2 glowing red pinpricks where the eyes should have been. I grabbed my phone to dial 911, but the call wouldn't go through. No service. The scratching started again, this time louder, more frantic. It moved from window to window, circling the cabin. I didn't know what to do. Running into the snowstorm seemed like a trap, but staying inside with whatever was out there felt even worse. Then, suddenly, it stopped. The silence was deafening. I waited, gripping the poker so tightly my knuckles turned white. Minutes passed, then hours. Nothing. By the time dawn broke, I convinced myself it was all over. I gathered my things, determined to leave the cabin behind forever. But when I stepped outside, my heart nearly stopped. There, in the snow around the cabin, were footprints. They circled the cabin again and again, overlapping with each pass. But that wasn't the worst part. Leading from the footprints was a trail of a single set of clawed prints heading back into the woods. At the edge of the trees, just before the darkness swallowed them up, the snow was marked with a message scratched deep into the ground. The message said, "See you next year." I never went back to that cabin on Christmas night. It was the first Christmas I spent at my grandparents' old house since they had passed away. The family decided to gather there one last time before selling the house, hoping to make new memories amidst the echoes of the past. The house was massive, creaky, and full of odd little quirks, hidden doors, narrow hallways, and an attic no one had touched in years. It always felt colder there, like the place refused to let go of its secrets. On Christmas Eve, as the family laughed and swapped stories downstairs, I volunteered to find the last box of decorations. My mom swore it was somewhere in the attic, so I grabbed a flashlight and climbed the rickety pull-down ladder. The attic smelled of dust and age, and my breath fogged in the chilly air. The flashlight's beam danced over forgotten furniture, cracked trunks, and piles of decaying cardboard boxes. I found the decorations quickly enough. A box labeled Christmas in my grandma's neat handwriting. But as I turned to leave, the flashlight flickered. And that's when I heard it. A faint rustling sound coming from the far corner of the attic. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling slightly. No answer. I told myself it was probably just a mouse or the wind stirring something loose. But the sound came again, this time louder. The beam of my flashlight wavered as I aimed it toward the corner once again. That's when I saw it. A rocking chair, moving slowly back and forth, though the air in the attic was perfectly still. "Someone's playing a prank," I muttered, trying to calm the rising panic. I took a step closer, my shoes crunching on the brittle wooden floor. And then I saw her. A figure hunched in the chair, her back to me. She was wrapped in an old shawl, her head tilted to the side as if listening. Her gray hair was matted, her shoulders bony and frail. "Grandma?" The figure didn't move. I stepped closer, the flashlight shaking in my grip. "Grandma, is that you?" Suddenly, she turned her head. Her face wasn't my grandmother's. It was pale, hollow, and stretched like wax melting in heat. Her mouth twisted into an unnatural smile, and her eyes, empty, black pits locked onto mine. "Not Grandma," she whispered, her voice dry as brittle as leaves. The rocking chair stopped moving, and before I could even think to run, she began to stand, her movements jerky and wrong, like a puppet on tangled strings. I bolted. I dropped the flashlight and the box, nearly falling down the attic ladder in my rush to escape. When I reached the living room, my family looked up in alarm. There's someone in the attic." My dad and uncle didn't hesitate. They grabbed a bat and a fireplace poker and headed upstairs, while the rest of us huddled downstairs together. Minutes passed in the tense silence before they came back down, their faces pale. "There's no one up there, bud," my dad said. But he didn't look convinced. I wanted to argue, to tell them what I saw, but then my uncle set something down on the table. It was an old photograph, one they'd found sitting on the rocking chair. In it, my grandmother stood as a child, her arm draped over an elderly old woman I didn't recognize. "That's her! That's the woman in the attic I saw!" My mom's face turned white. She pointed to the woman in the photo and said, "That's your great-grandmother. She died in this house on Christmas Eve." I didn't sleep that night. By morning, I had packed my things, and I haven't set foot in that house again. It eventually sold a few months later, but I wonder if the new homeowners have ever been brave enough to open the attic door.